All right, factoring quadratics. The biggest tip that I can give you is to write MAM, M-A-M, over top of quadratics. And that stands for multiply, add, multiply. All right? Biggest tip I can give you. So let's look at this and see what it looks like. So multiply, add, multiply. So you're looking for, so one of the biggest things with factoring is knowing when you factor a quadratic what the next step looks like. So knowing that you're going to have two pieces in parentheses, and you're going to figure out what multiplies to give you x squared, which is going to be x times x. And that's what it's going to be for all of these problems. There are higher level questions that you will get to in Algebra 2, but we're going to start here. Okay? So it always is going to start this way. And then your key is to figure out the two numbers that multiply to give you 80 and add to give you 18. That's the key. And one of the biggest things that we see as teachers is people mixing these two up. So if you put MAM over top of it, you'll remember that you're adding to get 18 and multiplying to get 80. So that's one of the best tricks I can give you. And you might have learned the diamond method, or you might have learned the box method, something like that. I just write stuff down in a chart. So I want to find two numbers that multiply to get me a positive 80 and that add up to get me a positive 18. And I just start listing the factors of 80. That's what I do. And one of the other things I'm going to really emphasize and talk to you about is how to identify what the symbols are going to be, what are the signs going to be here as far as plus and minus, based on these signs alone. So since this is positive, I'm multiplying to get a positive 80. The only way to multiply to get a positive is to multiply either positive times positive or negative times negative. Those are my only options. And since I have to add these numbers together to get a positive 18, I know it has to be plus plus. That's my only option. Okay? So you already know you're looking for two numbers that are positive. Okay? So you're just going to start listing numbers. I know that because 80 ends in 0, that 10 goes into it. So 8 times 10, doesn't matter which order you list them in. I know that it's 4 times 20. I know that it's 2 times 40. I know that it's 1 times 80. There's a whole bunch of stuff, right? 5 goes into this. And then you can just check these and add straight across and see if you get 18, which, luckily enough for this one, is just 8 and 10. Okay? And the little way to check yourself, just do a quick little check, and it's going to take me more time to explain it and write it than it will for you to do this check. So please do this little check and make sure that 8 times 10 gives you that 80, and that 8 plus 18 gives you that 18. And you don't have to write it down necessarily, but just giving yourself that moment of that multiplies to give you 80, that adds to give you 18. Best thing you can do. Okay? Let's apply it. Let's go for problem number 2. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to write MAM on top. I'm going to set up my parentheses. I know that to multiply to get an x squared is x times x. And I'm going to make my little t-chart. I want numbers that multiply to get me a positive 80 and add up to get me a negative 18. So again, the only way I can multiply to get a positive number is either a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. And since I have to add these numbers together to get a negative 18, it has to be two negatives. It has to be. Okay? So, again, just start listing out those factors. And once you find a pair that works, you don't have to keep going. Okay? Negative 8 and negative 10 is going to give me a negative 18, right? So you can still do a quick little check. Negative 8 times negative 10 should give me positive 80. That's right from here. negative 8 minus 10, or plus a negative 10, equals a negative 18, which is this guy right here. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay? Let's try another one. And remember, if I talk too fast, you can always pause me, or you can change the speed and slow down or speed up. I'm going to write ma'am on top. I'm going to set up my parentheses. X times x multiplies to get me that x squared. And then I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me negative 80 and add up to give me a positive 2. So if I multiply to get a negative, I have to have a positive and a negative. Positive times a negative gives me a negative. So I'm going to have one of each. And because I'm adding to get a positive 2, that tells me that the bigger number is going to be positive. Okay? So same deal. And I very specifically picked these 4 problems to start with. So again, I got my 8 and 10. Oh, 8 and 10 are 2 away from each other, so this works. I'm going to use 8 and 10, so I need to decide if it's negative 8 or if it's negative 10, right? And since I know I'm adding to get a positive, the bigger number has to be the positive number. So it's a positive 10 and a negative, oh, not a negative 2, sorry, and a negative 8. I got too excited about it. Okay, so it's that same process, and you can still do that little check for yourself. 10 times negative 8 gives you negative 80, boom. 10 minus 8 or plus a negative 8 gives me a positive 2. Got it. Okay. All right, how about this guy? So same deal. Multiply, add, multiply. Set up my parentheses. And I'm looking for numbers that multiply to give me negative 80 and add to give me negative 2. So again, if I'm multiplying to get a negative, I have to have a positive and a negative involved. And if they're adding to be negative, I know my bigger number is going to be negative. So I'm going to have one of each. And you know I did the same thing. It's 8 and 10 again, right? So if you're playing around with your signs here, this guy is going to give you a negative 2. Having 10, the bigger number by itself, its absolute value is bigger, be the negative. Okay? And of course, you can do your quick little check. This is the last one. I'll do a little check and write it down for you. You can do them for the other ones. So this turns into negative 80. Perfect. And then 8 minus 10 is going to be negative 2. There it is. And I just want to point something out to you. You can write this the other way around. You could write x minus 10, x plus 8. That would still be the exact correct answer. You can write them either way. There's no preference of how you put them, okay? As long as the signs are correct. Just got to be careful with there. All right, so let's start with a brand new one, different factors. We're not dealing in the land of 8 and 10 anymore. Okay, so we've got ma'am. We're setting up our parentheses. I've got my x times x. And in this case, I want a number that multiplies to give me a positive 30 and adds to get me a negative 11. So let's talk about the signs. If I'm multiplying to get a positive, it's either going to be plus, plus, or minus, minus, because negative times a negative kicks you back into a positive. And because I'm adding to get a negative, it's got to be 2 negative numbers. 2 negative numbers here, okay? So let's see what multiplies to give us 30. It ends in a 0, so I know that 10 goes into it, so I know it's 3 times 10. That doesn't work. The only way that I could get, because I know it has to be negative and negative, right? That's going to give me negative 13, so I'm close, but I'm not there. It's even, so I know 2 goes into it, 2 and 15, negative, negative. That gives me negative 17. Nope, not there. That's actually getting further away from what I need. If 10 goes into it, I know 5 goes into it. So 5 and 6. 5 times 6 is 30. Negative, negative, boom, there's my winner. That gives me negative 11. Ooh, okay, I got too excited and I put 11 there. So negative 5 and negative 6. Okay, so just to talk about what I was saying before, you could write it like this. Either answer is perfectly correct. All right, let's look at one more in this video. Just go through the process fresh one more time, and then we'll talk about a little bit something different that can happen to start you off. So I've got MAM, multiply, add, multiply. Set up my problem. I need numbers that multiply to give me negative 90, but add up to give me positive what? There's nothing in front of that x. Don't forget you can always put a 1 there. I think that's really, really helpful, okay? And then you need to multiply to get a negative. So 1 has to be positive and 1 has to be negative. And you know the bigger number is going to be positive. So let's see how we can use that to our advantage. So 9 ends in that 0 again, so I know 9 times 10 works. I know that the bigger number has to be positive and the smaller number has to be negative. So if I add those guys up, I get a positive 1. Woohoo! That's exciting. So positive 10, negative 9. There you go.